Hello, and welcome to Keep the Channel Open. My name is Mike Sakasagawa, and this is episode 12. This week I'm talking with my good friend, photographer Andi Schreiber. You're going to hear me say this several times during the conversation, but Andi was one of my earliest inspirations as a photographer, and I can honestly credit both her work and her help as big parts of how my own photography got to where it is today. So I was very pleased to get the chance to talk to her for the show, and you'll hear that in just a minute. First thing, though, I wanted to talk a little bit about Chinese food and Michael Jackson. All right, I know, but bear with me. So I've been thinking about this thing about culture and ownership and universality, and this kind of comes together between an article and a podcast, both from last week. The article was from NPR's food blog, The Salt, and the title is, When is it okay to profit from cooking other cultures' food? And that was basically about this idea of cultural appropriation as applied to food. For those of you who aren't maybe as into following conversations about race and culture as I am, there's this thing that people have been talking about recently about how a lot of immigrants and their descendants in this country, how a huge part of the way we experience our culture comes through food. And then when that food gets taken by the majority as sort of a new foodie trend or whatever, it feels like appropriation, which is to say that other people are able to profit, and especially financially profit, from a culture that isn't theirs, and they're able to do so in a way that the originators of that food weren't allowed to. So that's part one, and there's obviously a lot more to it, so if you want to check that out, you can check out the link that's in the show notes. And then part two is from Brian Formal's podcast, The LPV Show, which is an interview show not terribly unlike this one, but specifically focused on photography. And let me just say, if you like photography, that show is well worth your time. Anyway, last week, the guest, Shannon Taggart, was talking about spiritualism, and there was this really wild bit towards the end about Michael Jackson and all these weird coincidences and him speaking from beyond the dead, and then the arc of his life and his career. And I'm not going to be able to sum it up real well, but the bottom line is she wants to do this project about Michael Jackson, a photo project. And so putting those two things together, I was thinking about this question, which is, at what point does a story or a cultural item or even a life cease to be just its own thing and become universal? Like Chinese food and its history, its story, that is always going to be wrapped up with Chinese culture and Chinese American culture, and it's going to have a particular meaning for those people. That's not going to go away, nor should it. But on some level, Chinese food is also part of the tapestry of America at this point as well. We've all, most of us have eaten in a Chinese restaurant. We have some association with it, maybe particular memories that come with it. For me, it was that my family, who are, as you probably know, Japanese American, a lot of our big family parties for like my grandpa's birthday or things like that, they'd be at a Chinese restaurant. And I think really part of it was just that it was one of the few places that had really big tables, so we could all sit for a family-style meal in a restaurant back then. It was the 80s and 90s. And that has nothing to do with China or Chinese American culture. But it's also not exactly appropriative because this is authentically part of my non-Chinese family's tradition. And with Michael Jackson, his story, that's his life. And so that's going to mean something particular to his family, and if someone else tries to use his story for their own purposes, that could in some way be taking something from the family that doesn't belong to the taker. And then on top of that, pop R&B and the history of that kind of music is a part of the history of Black America that you can't minimize or dismiss that either. But Michael was, for those of us who were around in the 80s, he was legitimately part of all of our lives. And for many of us, that was in a really meaningful way. And where I'm headed with this is, how would it work to use a thing or a story that isn't yours, but also sort of is? How does that function? Can you do that respectfully and authentically in a way that isn't appropriative or opportunistic? I don't know. But that's what's on my mind right now. But okay, back to today's show. Andi Schreiber is a fine art documentary photographer based in Scarsdale, New York. And as I mentioned, she's a friend of mine. I first knew her from her depictions of family life, and if you know my work at all, you'll understand why I would be drawn to that kind of work. Her images are quite striking, using bold color and lighting, and the way she engages with family, with the concept of time passing, relationships. It struck a chord with me. More recently, she's brought together a series of self-portraits called Pretty Please, about reaching middle age and how that has affected her self-image and how other people treat her. I'd like to read the statement that goes along with that body of work, so here it is. These photographs from the ongoing series Pretty Please are begging you to look. Envelop me with your eyes and do not let go. When I was in my 30s, I heard the expression invisible 40s. I couldn't imagine how sexually inconsequential I'd feel throughout this decade. This series is interwoven with my domestic existence. I'm a devoted partner and a constant caretaker. Despite expansive growth, something has dimmed. The need for pleasure is no longer a priority. Midlife is like a second adolescence filled with feelings of uncertainty regarding sexuality. Our hearts may be deeply connected to a long-term partner, but our bodies got bored. Turning the camera on myself has allowed me to take stock as the chapter closes. I want to remain vibrant. I want my body to be useful. Disappearing is not an option. So in our conversation, we referenced that series, as well as another recent one titled Drift, and then briefly an older series called Wonderlust. And I've included links to all three of those in the show notes. I highly recommend all of them. And now sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Andi Schreiber. Yeah, so we're actually coming up on, I think, this year will be the 20th anniversary of when we started dating. In October.
Well, when you start in high school, then yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm married almost 20 years. June will be 20 years, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big thing.
It's a big thing, actually. Well, it's like a big year. We're married nearly 20 years, and then this summer I'm turning 50. So that's kind of freaking me out a little.
It's funny how
I know it's just a number, but
yeah.
It's like 20 and 50, so it's kind of like a big year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how those milestone numbers kind of end up hitting you. I remember when I was turning 30, I felt like, wow, that's really weird. But, it doesn't feel that different from 29, but then it also kind of does.
It does in a way, and I remember turning 30, actually, and having a party in our really small apartment at the time we were living in New York City, and just feeling the 30 sort of gave me license in some ways just to sort of be an adult finally. If I wanted to wear, plaid pants and a flowered shirt, then I could. And that's sort of how I took 30. And I think there was a little bit of confidence that came with that. And I'm not sure I feel the same confidence as 50 is approaching, but midlife is very different.
Yeah.
than those early years before you have kids and
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that actually kind of gets into your work. Actually, some of your more recent work, Pretty Please and Drift. It seems like that is something that has been on your mind a lot. The idea of aging and how that happens.
Yeah, I think in some ways I'm a little consumed with it, and I don't know if all people who are sort of hitting middle age and are dealing. I mean, I think it's pretty common to sort of be faced with your own mortality. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, it does hit you, and with aging parents and their own issues. And, it's definitely a different time of life, middle age for sure. Mm-hmm. You've still got, your kids are still pretty young.
Yeah, my oldest is 7. So.
Yeah. You've got some littles.
Yeah, it's a little exhausting sometimes. They're 7, 4, and 1. Having 3 of them on an airplane going coast to coast is not my favorite thing.
No, it's not. It's hard. It's really hard. I used to feel so kind of not embarrassed, but I was so nervous to fly with young kids because I didn't want to bother anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
And inevitably you just can't help it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help it because they have a hard time. They can't sit still for so many hours, and it's just hard for them, and their ears hurt, and they're hungry, and they have to go to the bathroom, and they're not supposed to. And yeah, it's definitely challenging. They definitely get easier. In fact, it gets to the point where like my kids don't even talk to me a whole flight now. They don't talk to me anyway, but on a flight, forget. They're really pretty independent at this point, which is nice as teenagers.
I find that as my kids have been getting older, well, like my son is 7 now, and that in a lot of ways he's a lot easier, but that the older he gets, and then my older daughter, she's 4. As each of them gets older, they get easier in all the ways that, like, all the things I find difficult about them as babies and as toddlers and young children, then that part gets easier and new problems come up. And they're not necessarily easier or harder, but they're just a lot more complicated.
Yes, I think that's really true, actually. I guess when they're younger, you're really so concerned with do they eat, do they eat dinner? Do they brush their teeth? You're sort of more in line with the routine of what the day is. And I feel like as soon as you get a handle on what that routine is and what their needs are, they change. So you have to change.
Yeah, that's kind of like the one constant thing through your life, right? Everything is just always changing.
Constantly. And you kind of have to be flexible and change with it. I could pine away for when my kids were smaller, and my husband and I, we do that occasionally. We'll talk about when they were little and how I wish I could just play with them for a day and hang out with, 3-year-old Jonah was really a fun kid. And we do miss that, but at the end of the day, you kind of got to be where you are. As much as I miss some of the simplicity of those days where it was really just about eating, sleeping, getting them bathed, and going to bed by 6:30. That was really kind of short-lived, although it felt like eternity at the time.
Yeah. But isn't that just like everything, right? It always feels like an eternity no matter what it is. And then...
Yeah. You know what? I think the thing with little kids, though, really, with children, small children, is that it really is such a finite amount of time, because you're going to be an adult, God willing, right, for a long time, for many, many years. And of course, we change as adults. But once you're an adult, you reach your full height, whatever that is, you're kind of going to be there.
Yeah.
But little kids, they change so quickly, and it seemed like it was going to last forever, and it really, really doesn't.
Yeah.
It's such a precious time.
Yeah.
I think your work really speaks to that so beautifully.
Well, I try to, but it's interesting. I think one of the first, you were really one of the first people who I saw working in this space. You and Elizabeth Fleming, I think. Do you know her work?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, love it. Yeah, beautiful photographer. Beautiful.
Yeah, and I remember. When I was first starting out, which, really wasn't that long ago, but I remember seeing her work and your work, I think maybe on Lens Scratch. I see a lot of the stuff that I see the first time, it seems like I see it through Lens Scratch.
I know. I felt the same way, actually, when I first probably saw Elizabeth's work as well. I think it was on Lens Scratch.
Yeah. But it was one of these things where, I was just starting out, coming back to photography after being away from it. Like, I took it one semester in high school, and I've always loved it, but coming back to it, my wife got me a little Nikon D40 for my birthday, right, which was like, right before our son was born, like a month before our son was born. And I was just sort of falling back into it. And, first thing was I was trying to figure out how to get into take pictures like a lifestyle photographer would. And then seeing your work and her work, it was this thing that really opened up this whole new world of possibility for me.
Definitely. I agree. 100%. I felt the same way.
Yeah. It's really pretty amazing how, I feel like you were one of these people for me that, seeing people make art out of their lives was such a revelatory thing for me, because it wasn't really something that I had a lot of awareness that people do. And thinking like that this was something that maybe I could do too was really, it was a really important step for me. So, thanks.
It's interesting because it does sort of give you license when you see other people doing it. I mean, I guess early in my suburban existence, I really wanted to make pictures. I didn't know what I wanted to make pictures of. My background had been as a newspaper photographer and then as a photo editor for many years in New York City, working at various publications, magazines, and the New York Times as well. But after a certain point, my kids were sort of, up on their feet a little bit, and I really had this ache to make pictures, and I didn't know what to make pictures of. And I kept, because of my background, I really was thinking photo stories and photo essays, and more, I guess, a straightforward documentary approach. But I couldn't come up with anything that really grabbed me, and I didn't want to be away from my family for very long either. I still, I'm a full-time caregiver, so I think initially, one of the first people I did see was Elizabeth Fleming. I saw her work on Lens Scratch. And another photographer's work I totally stumbled upon accidentally was Jessica Backus.
I don't know her.
She's a German photographer, but also photographs, not so much family, but just really very much the everyday. Details, puddles, reflections, a crushed water bottle or a crushed Arizona iced tea can. And it was really interesting for me. I think I had gotten this email from ICP that they were selling her book. And I sort of looked at her work, but I was like, okay, I'll order it. But this was a long time ago. It's probably could it be 2009 maybe when I ordered that book? I think that's when it came out, maybe 2010. And so it was really eye-opening for me to see that you could sort of make pictures of everyday things and they could be more meaningful than just what you're seeing. What there is, a tennis ball, for example, in a puddle. That there's more to it. So that was kind of eye-opening, but also Elizabeth Fleming was definitely very interesting to me. And in fact, I emailed her to sort of just connect, because at the time I had a blog that I was doing with a writer, a friend of mine, and we were taking turns. And I would make an image and post it, and then she would respond with text, and this sort of went back and forth like a chain for about a year. But I was in touch with Elizabeth during that time, who was really very supportive of what I was doing. And it was so nice that she was, approachable, because that was the first time I'd really reached out to somebody, cold, and she was really lovely.
Yeah, that was exactly the same experience that I had. And I think that's actually how I got in touch with you too. I just sort of emailed you out of nowhere and said, I like your work. And now here we are. Here we are.
Years later, Facebook friends. I know. Someday we'll meet in person, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. But actually, at that, you were really one of the people who really not just encouraged me, but, really went out of your way to sort of, give me some critiques, some advice, to actually help me out with my work. And that's always really meant a lot to me.
I love your work and I love what you do, and I love, your approach and your process is so, transparent and really, I think, very meaningful, clearly to you. And I love that. And, you're really open about what you do. And I think it's important. I think you've had a similar experience that I have had, where you sometimes will show up at a portfolio review and somebody will say to you, well, there's only room for one Eleanor Karrueche.
Right.
And I have had that. I really have. So and I know you have too. So, look, we're going to make our pictures because we need to make them. And hopefully, I don't know if that's always enough, but for right now, it has to kind of be enough.
Yeah.
You make them the way you need to make them, and you're not necessarily thinking about the audience or where they're going, or if they're going to be a book or a gallery will pick you up or whatever I think my smaller goal is always just to make the pictures of the people I care about.
Yeah.
That's really important to me.
Yeah. That is interesting. It's like one of those things, like for me, I actually haven't ever gotten Karrueche before in a review, but I get Sally Mann all the time.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like it's one of those things where people always, will say that, you have to make your work for yourself. You can't make your work about pleasing other people. And certainly, like, from the standpoint of making the work, like, I totally agree with that. But there's always this thing where it's like, if I really don't care what other people think, and I really don't care about other people not liking it necessarily, but if I really don't care about other people's reactions to it, then why am I showing it to people? You know?
Well, okay. I think you have to make the work the way you need to make it. And then at some point, it's good to have other sets of eyes. You know, does your work speak at a universal level? You're really not going to know unless you share it.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's even important, you know, do we need to make work that speaks sort of universally? I don't know. But it's always nice if somebody, you know, if you get an email from someone and they really sort of get what you're doing and it resonates for them, that's really kind of like the best thing ever. You know, that's like, you know, more so than, you know, a gallerist or an editor, you know, responding to your work. I mean, hearing from regular people really is a thrill for me.
Yeah.
I think it's really great. I'd heard from somebody recently who's taking a course in the Miami area. And I guess my name came up in the course somehow, which was kind of interesting to me. And she wrote me, which was really nice. And, you know, just all about doing her own family work. And it was so nice to hear from her. And I really appreciated that. You know, who knows where your work really, where does it really go? Who does it really hit home for? No pun intended. But, you know, really, how far reaching is your work? And it doesn't necessarily matter. But if you hear from one person once in a while, it's actually really very gratifying, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and for me, I think that's actually, I mean, I feel like the biggest thing for me with art is having the ability, the opportunity to connect with other people. And, you know, when I hear from someone who's seen my work that it has meant something to them, I really feel like I've accomplished something. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really what it's about. I mean, look, we could go to portfolio reviews and events and show work, and that's all nice. I just don't really know. I don't know. There are outcomes from those things, but I'm wondering what the point is sometimes. You know, I think in some ways the best takeaway from going to a portfolio review is sort of the camaraderie you feel with other, you know, photographers in attendance. You know, we call it the photo bubble, but it's so nice to be in the photo bubble for a few days and just sharing work and meeting people, whether it's like the hotel lobby or whatever, you know, wherever you are. I mean, that's kind of the best part for me of these portfolio reviews is sort of the connection to other artists, which I don't really get in my day-to-day because I'm pretty isolated out here in suburbia. Yeah,
me too. Definitely. Recently, I've started connecting more, you know, through the podcast, and actually I joined a local photo collective here in San Diego, but all of that stuff ends up coming out of connections I've made at events, like a review event or a festival or something. And that,
they can be very useful for connection, I think.
Yeah. So one of the you know, our you know, things that we have in common, you know, we both take pictures of our families. And that's certainly what initially drew me to your work. But then more recently, you started in a sort of different direction. I mean, you can see how it's related emotionally, but your Pretty Please series, I gotta say, like, and I know I've told you this before, but it really knocked my socks off when I first saw it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think that this idea of you know, facing the way that, you know, like we said, how, you know, things change over the course of your life, and particularly, you know, how your body changes over the course of your life and how other people interact with you and your body. It's such like, the way that you do that in that series is so, like, unflinching. It's so just fearless. I really admire that.
Oh my God, I'm full of fear. But thank you. I don't know. I have to be in a pretty emotional place to make those pictures, honestly. So once they're kind of made and out there, not that I separate myself from it, but it's hard to get back to that place to make more work. And I don't necessarily feel that series is complete. And as this specter of 50 is approaching, I just wonder if that's like, I need to get it in gear a little bit. But I mean, I'm certainly not going to, fall apart when I'm 50, but or disappear for that matter. But I think I'm just one. I feel like there's some pictures that are missing from this series. But thank you. I just have to be in a pretty emotional place, and kind of almost like a desperate place to make them. I would say that all of them really come from that.
Yeah, it's such a, the way our society is sort of set up, and the way we all, the way we look at women, and the way that that changes as women get older. But I remember this thing my mom told me once when I think I was in high school, and she was telling me this thing about something that her mom had told her about how you never really feel like a grown-up. You never really feel older. How, I think my grandma at the time was, if I was in high school, she would have been in her mid-60s probably. And she had told my mom that, she still feels like a little kid a lot.
Oh, sure.
But that's not necessarily how you get treated.
No.
Yeah. And I think that's especially true, like a lot more true for women than it is for men.
Yeah, I think it takes men a lot longer to maybe feel that way, or to notice that they're being treated a little bit differently because they're older.
Yeah.
And I think it's because men, frankly, they just age differently than women for the most part. They really do. It's not fair, but that's the way it is.
I guess, but I mean, it seems like I think that might be a part of it. But I think maybe, to me, it seems like more of it has to do with the way that we've societally constructed the idea of, what people's value are, and also particularly what people's sexual value is.
Totally. Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, women are the baby makers, we're the vessels. And, once that shifts, I think you can really, I think there's a perception that we're less valued in some ways, I mean, really. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like, I don't know, it's a thing that I don't have a lot of experience with, as a man, and particularly as an Asian man, like being considered sexually, or like as a sexual being or object, is not, it's not something that is like fundamental to my identity, In fact, in a lot of ways, the opposite is true. Like, I mean, I know this is a thing a lot for Asian men in particular, that we tend to be sort of completely desexualized and neutered, and a lot of us have our sort of complexes about that. But
you're enlightening me.
It's interesting. They've done all these studies, and apparently like there was an OkCupid thing that came out a year or two ago where they were showing that people's responses to different profiles, that that white women tend to be, of a particular age, tend to get the most favorable responses, and then the least favorable responses are actually black women, but then not that much more is Asian men.
Wow.
And it's interesting too, because like right under white women is Asian women, and it has to, like, it's an interesting thing, like how that dichotomy works.
And I wonder sort of what they based that, like what, you talk about like a favorable response. Did they conduct a poll? Or are they just going through people's data? Like, how did they figure that out? I wonder.
It's like they were looking at who was getting the most responses, who was getting the most sort of callbacks, like, hey, would you be interested in hooking up with me, kind of thing. And that was, it wasn't actually based on like a voluntary poll. They were just mining their data.
Right. Yep. Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah. It's
yeah, no, that's really, I mean, that really speaks volumes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting thing. It made me feel a little weird thinking about it, although it did kind of line up with my experience. But like, I think that there's sort of like, you know, like if you grow up like, and people just treat you completely asexually for your whole life, then that's like, that's one thing. But if people treat you as a sexual being to start with and then take that away from you, that seems like it would be kind of a completely different thing, you know?
Well, I guess it's different, but they're related. I mean, because we're all sexual beings. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, it's kind of why we're here. It's what we do. Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's really important, actually. And not that you necessarily want sexual attention from somebody you don't want it from.
Yeah.
But it's very complex, but it's so much of who we are.
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, it's very important. And not to say that sexuality has to end at a certain point. It certainly doesn't when you, for example, lose your ability to have children. I mean, you know, you're still a sexual being, but I think just the perception of how you're treated and looked at definitely changes. Mm-hmm. You know, I get a lot of, let's say, how can I explain, like less, fewer people say looking right in my eyes to talk to me. Mm-hmm. I'm a little more dismissed. And I've noticed it over the last few years. Of course, you know, I make an effort to make eye contact with whoever I'm interacting with at the library, the store, the checkout, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's rare when somebody really makes eye contact with you and engages you, even just on a you know, a very sort of basic level. Mm-hmm. It's always nice when that happens, but I don't find it happening as often as I used to. And I just wonder if that's sort of how I'm being perceived as a middle-aged person.
Yeah. Yeah. In these photographs, I feel like there's this sort of combination of you know, vulnerability, but, you know, and almost like on some level, some of the pictures, there's like a certain sense of almost resignation to them, but then like in a few of them too, and you know, particularly when combined with your statement, like there's this one where you're looking in the rearview mirror and you can just see your eyes, and there's this almost sort of like, it's hard to exactly read your expression in it, but to me it seems almost like kind of defiant, you know, like there's a certain like I don't know, like I want to say like, well, like fuck you all if you're gonna, you know, treat me that way, kind of thing. You know. Well, there are days that I definitely feel that way. Yeah. You know, not that I'm being mistreated, and I'm not going to whine about that, but it's just different, you know. Yeah. And I still laugh, like honestly, when somebody will call me ma'am, and it's really okay. I mean, in some parts of the country, ma'am is really a very proper way to address someone. Right. But it does make me laugh. I mean, I try to take it really in the right spirit, but. You know, there is some defiance here. You know, in some ways, our bodies are deceiving us. You know, like what your grandmother had said. Like she still feels like a kid. Mm-hmm. I still feel that way too. I don't really feel like an adult, despite the fact that I'm raising children who are probably in some ways more mature than I am. I really don't feel like an adult. I really don't. I mean, they seem to have better answers and they're better problem solvers than I am and ever was. So you know, that's nice. But I do still feel younger than I guess my body's telling me I am. Mm-hmm. You know, some of my friends, we laugh like, you know, where's your pain today? You know, and we're talking about like, you know, sometimes they're bigger pains than others, but it's kind of like an ongoing joke, like what hurts today? And I'm totally serious. It can be like, you know, my toe hurts, my hip hurts, my back hurts. I have a headache. I mean, it's just constant. We're all just constantly complaining about there's something going on. Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, if I have a day where I'm not complaining about that, it's sort of notable. Yeah. And they're mostly small things, thank goodness. But, you know, it definitely is real. And it's not just me. It's like my whole like group of friends and my neighbors. And it's really kind of funny in a way. But, I mean, what else are you going to do? You know? Yeah. It's just what your body does. Can't help it. It reminds me of that... There's Phil Toledano has this line that he likes to say in interviews, and I think he put it in one of his books too. That the thing about cliches is that they're all true.
I love that.
And it's one of those things, you know, I find, you know, in my work, I'm always like wondering, is this like a cliche? Is this, you know, because a lot of these experiences are things that you have at least seen the sentiment expressed somewhere else before, and as you've seen it a lot, and you're like, oh, childhood is fleeting, and it's
Of
such a moment.
course.
But
Right.
then when it's happening to you, it is like it is a cliche, but it's also really meaningful.
Yeah. And I think that's probably like anything, right? Until you're experiencing it, it's really hard to understand. And that comes with, there's a whole range of that. Issues that pop up through a lifetime. You don't understand until it affects you or somebody you love, whether it's illness or whatever issue. I think it's pretty common, but particularly those cliches like childhood is fleeting, and you really, even things like the idea that you really can lose yourself once you have kids, and they're kind of true. Those ideas, you really have to sort of be on your toes and be aware of it. In some ways, I'm very much the same person I've always been, but it's an ongoing, effort to stay in touch with the things that are important to me, because it's very easy to be distracted by child raising, social media, I could go on and on, but mortgage payments, whatever it is, it's a life full of stuff. And I think it's really hard to stay true to yourself. And if that self changes, then stay true to that.
Yeah.
We do evolve, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I remember, sort of when you had first started releasing, like showing Pretty Please and releasing it online, that, to me, the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, this is great. And it seemed like you were getting a lot of positive feedback, but then like, I can't remember when this was. It was like a year or two ago. I saw some comment somebody left on some online feature that was just like this completely vitriolic.
Yeah.
I can't think, she was like describing you as being self-hating, or I don't remember what exactly it was, but it really surprised me because it seemed like such a, like it just was unexpected to me.
Well, some people look at the work and say that I'm saying I'm all washed up, life is over. And that's not really the message of the work at all.
No.
It's really about taking stock right now and experiencing what I'm feeling. And that's really what it is. It's pretty, maybe it's a lot of navel gazing or, whatever, but there was a lot, the Huffington Post ran Pretty Please. I guess it was maybe a year ago, August. So August of 2014, I think.
Yeah.
And it was shocking to me in some ways. The comments, it was really bad. I don't want to say, oh, it went viral. It wasn't that. It just, people are really, really mean.
Yeah.
Especially when they could speak anonymously.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. Like, within about a day of that going live on the Huffington Post, I just had to stop looking at the comments. Like, I really was reading them all, and there were like thousands of them.
Yeah. And
some of them were great. People really got it, and they're really supportive and loved the work, and that was wonderful. And then I kind of had to decide at some point. I'm like, okay, look, the work's gotten a lot of likes and a lot of shares and whatever. I'm not so much a follower of those numbers anyway. But the only thing I can do for myself is say, well, I really wouldn't want to be making work that is just loved. I really wouldn't. So I appreciated some of the negativity, actually, because it just meant that my work hit a nerve. Yeah. And that's really was, that was my takeaway from it. It's okay to not please everyone. It's okay, if someone doesn't like your work, they don't get it. It's totally okay. And I actually feel like I wouldn't be doing, the work any favors if I was just making work that was universally loved and everybody got it. I'm not shooting, look, I don't want to put down people who say just only photograph babies. It's hard to not love that work, but it's not what my work is about. So I'm okay with the negativity, actually.
Yeah.
And I think it's more important to me to have that in some ways. So I made peace with it, but it was alarming, honestly, to read what some people had written. Even like there's a image from that series, a drop of menstrual blood on a toilet seat. And the comments on that image alone, like one drop of blood was so upsetting, and menstrual blood. Yeah. It's like life-giving.
Yeah.
The comments on that one picture were wild. Well, it's okay to look at pictures of war and blood and guts all over the front page of our papers and, home pages of our online papers, whatever. But one drop of blood was upsetting to people.
Yeah.
I mean, it was mind blowing to me.
Yeah, it really is one of those things where like if the way that people feel like they are entitled to comment, particularly when women are talking, and particularly commenting on women's bodies, and the way that like these totally natural processes are so heavily stigmatized. Menstruation, breastfeeding is such a huge
oh my
thing
God,
right now.
I know, it's ridiculous. Makes me so mad.
Like you'd think, I'm sure that there are men out there who are making work that is not too terribly dissimilar in theme about right, and it's like,
yeah,
I cannot imagine that they inspire the same level of just nastiness. It seems like that's something that the internet really reserves for women, and it's so infuriating,
Totally. I mean, look what's going on. I don't want to really talk about Donald Trump, but I mean, there's so much misogyny.
Yeah.
I just can't get over it. I can't believe it's 2016 and there's still so much misogyny in the world. It's unbelievable. And Hillary Clinton, okay, love her, don't love her, whatever, but like the hatred, I don't think she deserves that. I really don't.
Yeah.
There's so much misogyny. It really is upsetting to me. And I think it'll be upsetting for the next few months until we sort out who's going to be our next president. But it's like open season on women right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I was pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just so pissed off when I started reading some of those comments. They always say you should not read the comments, but
they say that. But it kind of like put a little fire under me. I was like, you know what? Good. Fuck them.
Yeah.
I really mean that. Like, I sincerely don't want to make work that everyone appreciates. It's because then I wouldn't be, making the best work I can make. I really believe that.
Yeah, I remember you saying that at the time, and I'm very impressed by people who can take that kind of. I mean, I try to do that myself, but a lot of times when I get, I don't think I've ever gotten comments as negative as that, and like some of them, like they make me want to curl up in a ball and rock back and forth.
Well, it did a little bit. It definitely stung for sure, and I wouldn't recommend that for anybody necessarily. I mean, it was really nice that the Huffington Post ran it, and Feature Shoot ran it also, and there were some comments on there as well. And you would think that the crowd for Feature Shoot would be a little. They are better in some ways. It's clearly a crowd that likes photography. Mm-hmm. But there were comments there, and that was surprising too.
Yeah.
It's the nature, I think, of the internet and the anonymity that it allows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. We can't all be so PC. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm a big girl, despite the fact that I, still think I'm a child in some ways. But yeah.
There is, one of the things I've always really liked about your work is that you're engaging with these themes that are kind of heavy. Whether it's watching your kids grow up and this sort of, there's a wistfulness to that. Watching yourself mature, and there's some heaviness to that. But the way that your pictures look, like there's a real playfulness to the way that you compose your pictures, and the way that's particularly the way you use color. That the juxtaposition of the sort of heaviness of the theme and the liveliness of those elements really works really well, I feel like.
Thank you. It's funny. I remember years ago, I went to the University of Michigan for college, and I was in their School of Art. And, one of the options I could have taken was color theory. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't want to do it, because I felt like I just want to love color the way I love it. And I don't want anybody to tell me what it means or what I should be thinking about when I'm putting two colors next to one another. Mm-hmm. So I never took the class. It was a very popular class, and the instructor was really well known and beloved, really big deal of a guy at the time. And I never wanted to take it. So I do really respond to color after many years of only shooting black and white work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, color sort of became something for me really just out of necessity. I was home and I had, my first digital camera, similar to yours, was a D50.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first digital camera that I really, had, DSLR. And, I don't know. I started seeing in color because I knew there was no black and white film in the camera, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I just try to, I certainly don't make pictures that are about the color, but I really do respond to it and I kind of chase it sometimes.
Yeah.
I'll see something, go, oh, that.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of almost like it's kind of a visceral reaction, I guess, for me when I see like something like that's really colorful that I really respond to. I can't explain it any other way. It's like a gut reaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the way that you, your colors are just so vibrant. And also the way that you use light. A lot of your photos look like they use on-camera flash.
Some of them, yeah.
And there's just I don't know a better word than vibrancy. They just feel very alive,
I think some of like the paintings that I like are like the ones that are really very alive on the surface. I always love Matisse or Bernard, but I think that in some ways, like I really like when I use the pop-up flash on the camera,
mm-hmm.
Or even a larger flash on camera, it's because I really want the whole surface to sort of illuminate.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always do that. There's a time for that, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I am always thinking about sort of the whole, and I love that. I think, I love the look of Phil Flash, actually. When it works, it, can work beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not afraid to use the pop-up flash on my camera.
Yeah.
I think some people kind of like, oh, you use that? I use it all the time.
Yeah.
I use it less so now. Well, the other camera that I use a lot is a Fuji X100S.
Mm-hmm.
And the built-in flash on that camera is just okay. It's not great. So it's because of that camera has sort of changed my work a little bit,
mm-hmm.
and that I'm really looking a little more at available light and mood, I think, than I am when I'm working with a DSLR camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with Nikon cameras still, mostly a D300S and a D600, really, that's more my party work. But, most of my portfolio came from the D300S, some with the D50, and now more recently, particularly with Drift, a lot with the Fuji X100S because it's portable.
Yeah.
And I'm getting older and I don't want to be weighed down so much. And if I don't take that camera, I'm not taking a camera, frankly,
right.
because I just don't want to deal with the bulk of the other ones. So my work, I think my recent work has changed because of that camera, for better or worse, but it has slowed me down a lot. So I think like the surface of the pictures looks very different with that camera than from the DSLR.
There's definitely a change. I've got them open on my screen right now. There's definitely, a different quality to the light in, like when you compare the Wonderlust series to Drift.
Yeah, it's different.
It changes, but it's still very recognizably you, I feel like.
Well, that would be good if you could feel that way. That's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a very different. They have kind of a different vibe. I mean, color is still super important to me. But again, I think things have changed. My kids have changed, and a little bit of my process has changed. In that, I think what's nice about the Fuji is that I really do kind of have to slow down and sort of be a little more careful with them at this age. They're 13 and 15, and last week I walked into my younger son's bedroom, and the two of them were in there, and they were like shooting baskets, and the room is not big. It's a small hoop on the back of a door. It's whatever. It's not exactly a Nerf, but there's like a mini basketball. And I walked in thinking, I'm going to take some pictures of them playing basketball. Like they're getting too big for this room, and I haven't really photographed them doing this in a long time. And I walked in. It was in the evening, and my younger son literally walked out. He said, "I have to go wash up now." And I looked at it, I was like, what are you talking about? You never go wash up. Like, we're always after him to go wash up, and it's time for bed, turning your phone. Did you floss your teeth? Did you put on whatever moisturizer? And he just walked out of the room as soon as I walked in with my camera. That has never happened before.
Yeah.
So, I got to tread a little carefully here, and I certainly love them to pieces, as we all love our kids. But it's what I kind of need to do. And I kind of hope they allow me to keep doing it for a long time. But I'm also feeling like the college years are approaching. Time's going to be up in a way. Things will change again. And right now they're in my house and we all share our home together. We're under the same roof. And I love that. So it's not, but they got to go off on their own at some point. So I realize that even this time is really limited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I hope I can continue to make the work that I need to make with them. It's really important to me.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing. As kids, when they're in their infancy, they have no awareness at all. But then as they grow, they gain more of that. And the process of photographing them becomes more of an exchange. That, like, it's interesting that like, it's one of those things where you always kind of have to sort of navigate between what you want and what they want or what they would want.
Yeah.
And that's tough.
It's really tough. It's really tough. I admire somebody, like Martine Fougeron. Her work, her kids are real teenagers, they're in it. And she's made those pictures, and it's so impressive. Now that I have teenagers of my own, I realize how impressive that really is, because it's just not easy to do. For example, my older son had a birthday party in February, and, just a bunch of guys over the house, whatever. He turned 15, and they were over, and they're all kind of like laying on each other and annoying each other. And I couldn't quite bring myself to make a decent picture of them. I took like 2 frames, and I just had to get out of there. And then they really ran away from me and went into my basement and hid. And I just thought, do I want to go in with my camera and take over this moment for them? Like, I just stayed away, which surprised me, but I felt like I couldn't intrude on his birthday party, which was kind of sad.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would do it the same way again. That had never happened before, but I kind of stopped myself because I just didn't want to be like the weird mom with the camera who's all over these boys who are laying on top of each other.
Right.
I mean, although I'm really kind of sad I didn't do it, but at the time I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really couldn't.
Yeah, it's tough because, in a lot of ways, and this is the same thing for me, like your pictures are like, in a literal sense, they're of other people, but they're really more about you kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm certainly standing here. I think you could feel that in the pictures. I mean, they're my perspective. I'm never going to say they're, objective. It's my reality.
Right. And it's just such a thing because, like, or at least this is how it is for me, when I'm taking pictures of my family, it's really more that I'm trying to take pictures of the way I feel in the moment and the way I feel at this time of my life, the way I feel towards them, the way I feel about time passing, myself getting older, them getting older. And that's what I'm trying to take the picture of. That's what the picture is about. But I have to use them to do that. So it's one of these things where it's like, you want to balance, like they're in my life, so they're a part of my life. So representing them as me in some way is something that artistically makes sense. But then also, they're their own people. So,
Yeah, they have more of a say over that, over their image. At least they want to when they get older. Mm-hmm. And I totally understand that. I just think, there's really going to be no objective version of their years, living under our roof. Mm-hmm. It's not possible. But they are sort of participants. And I every year, for example, like around their birthdays, I try to post on my blog, my wayward blog. Mm-hmm. But, I almost didn't do it this year. My younger son was turning 13 in January, and he said, "Are you going to do a blog post for me?" And it was just funny because I kind of didn't want to. I just sort of wanted to let this year slide. I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And usually I have some idea, but I couldn't really get behind anything. But then I thought, it's really important to them. And even my older son as well. They kind of like the blog post on their birthday, which is funny and really sweet. So I kind of want to do that, for them. I love that they're interested in it, that they care.
Yeah.
And
that's
it's meaningful
the same thing
them.
for me. My I make a little birthday slideshow video for each of my kids every year. And I just have been anticipating that one of these years, like my son, he's going to say, don't do it this year because he'll be embarrassed or whatever. But like every year, he actually gets really excited about it. And
nice. It's like the year in pictures.
Yeah,
that's great.
I don't know how long that's going to last, but who knows?
I love that. I make these digital daily books, and I'm a little behind also in my in my bookmaking here. But I've been making these sort of like annual like yearbooks for our family for a couple of years. And I do them through Blurb, and it's an insane number of photographs that go into these books. I call them, Digital Daily 2014 or whatever. But it's all the pictures that I'm not posting, that are not going into my portfolio. It's everything else. But there's literally like 600 pictures in these books, and I'm really glad I make them because, it's a much broader view, and I want them to have these books and have lots to look back on. I think it's really important to know where we came from.
Yeah.
And to appreciate that. Even my kids, like my younger one was bar mitzvahed in January as well. So I made a montage for the bar mitzvah, and my older son got to see it before my younger son. We sort of waited for the bar mitzvah to show it to him. But Jonah, who's my older one, got to see it before the bar mitzvah, and he got a little choked up, which really surprised me because even he was like, wow, Zach was so cute. Like, we were so cute. Like, even, like, I never had that perspective as a kid. I never look back at pictures and go, oh, look how little I was. All I wanted to do was move forward. But I think they do have the ability to sort of look back and realize that it's a special time. And I think that's really, a nice thing and a testament to that, who they are and maybe who they'll become. Just be able to take some of that with them and to appreciate it while, certainly looking forward to becoming adults and driving and going to college and all those other things.
So, for the second segment, the thing I always do, I ask the guests to bring their own topic, and the topic that you chose was artists who inspire us. Yeah,
who inspires our practice.
Right. So, did you have someone in mind that you wanted to start with?
Well, something happened recently that I thought was kind of funny. David Bowie died sort of unexpectedly for those of us who weren't aware he was ill.
Right.
And I posted something on a friend's page, a friend of mine from college who loved David Bowie and took me to my first David Bowie concert. So I just wrote him hope you're okay, Alex, hope you're good. I'm so sorry. It was almost like a condolence message, but we're all feeling it. And I'm still sad about Bowie's death. But someone who I guess knew me from college, who I had completely never stayed in touch with, but just somebody in the college dorm, saw my post, who was a friend of my friend Alex, and she wrote me this lovely note. She said, hey, I have this, you may not remember me, but I have this great picture of you. And she sent me a photograph of myself, my younger self, and it's from spring of 1985, and I'm in sort of one of my first photography classes at the University of Michigan, and I'm in the hallway of my dorm, so cinder block hallway, and I'm surrounded by pictures that I made for a project on Diane Arbus.
Oh, you posted this to Facebook, yeah?
Yeah, it really kind of blew my mind in a way because, first of all, it's so interesting that there's somebody out there that maybe has pictures of you that really are, it's like your archive. It's where you've been, but they're floating all over the place, and you don't know who has what. And this picture basically came out of nowhere, but it was such a gift because I'd forgotten about the photography project. I'd forgotten about being inspired by Dan Arbus. And I'm sitting with these pictures that are in mats, and I guess I'm preparing for a crit. And it just was a funny thing to remember, where I was. I had completely forgotten about this, but I knew immediately when I looked at the picture what those pictures were from and what they were based on and my motivation and my inspiration. So, kind of funny when things like that happen. I've been thinking a lot about, who has inspired me over the years. And this was one that just came out of left field, but I was so appreciative to have the picture.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten.
Yeah. It's an adorable picture.
It's really funny because I've got this asymmetrical haircut, which is very of the moment in 1985.
Yeah.
And it's just funny. When people come out of the woodwork, who knows what's floating out there of me or you, in our earlier days. Who knows?
Oh, good Lord.
I know.
Most of the pictures of me in college are me doing very inadvisable things.
Yeah. I'm sure there are those too. Those haven't surfaced yet of me, but I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I just was I've been thinking a lot about, who's inspired me. I was certainly very inspired by Dan Arbus early on, to the point that my parents also learned early on that they did not want to be photographed by me. And that has been an ongoing theme since 1985, I would say, where they're a little wary of me. Don't get so close. Yeah, they've always been very wary of me as a photographer. And I think that kicked it off, really, was my love of this work.
Yeah. Yeah. Arbus is so, gosh, I can't think of the word I'm trying to think. Her I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, her pictures are very striking, and particularly so considering the time period in which she made them. But yeah, I can see where.
I had never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
I was sort of like, oh, Cartier-Bresson, and like Kudelka, and just a totally different place. But like her work really, I think, was certainly revolutionary for so many photographers.
Yeah. I definitely heard a lot of people citing her as an influence and inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It's interesting you bring up Cartier-Bresson. I think that's another person that a lot of people point to, and
yes.
It's funny the way that like I respond differently to different photographers over the course of my my artistic career is fairly short. Like I've only been doing this about maybe 6 years now. And I remember, Cartier-Bresson when I first started seeing his pictures, when I first started getting interested in street photography, which I'm terrible at, but I still, every once in a while will try to indulge.
I know, I love it so, but I can't do it to save my life.
Yeah. And his pictures were one of these things where I remember I think everybody goes through this phase if they try street photography to like have their like, I'm going to try and do the Cartier-Bresson thing. And now.
Yep. Everybody.
Yeah. And now I find that like, I do still really like his pictures, but in terms of work that inspires what I do or inspires me to make work, it doesn't speak to me in the same way that it used to.
Right, me too.
It's interesting. I find lately a lot of times, like there are a lot of photographers whose work motivates me. But
Tell me who.
Okay, well, I mean, as I've mentioned, you are one of those people.
Oh, thank you. That's
but and another person who was an early inspiration for me was a French photographer named Alex Crété-Sistermans.
Oh, I don't know him.
Yeah, I saw his. He has a collection of family-ish pictures. He mostly does travel stuff, but like some of the more interesting travel stuff I've seen. And he shoots with the Mamiya 7, and wow. His pictures are all just. He has the most gorgeous light in his pictures, and they always make me really jealous. But I remember I saw his.
Wow! I hope you'll post the link. I want to see his work.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know him. Oh, that's nice. Great. Well, it's so funny. I think you find places and people and things that can certainly inspire you over the years, and they come from sometimes unexpected places. Mm-hmm. I think you can sometimes stumble upon them and be really, really moved.
Yeah.
I had lived in Boston for a few years after college and was sort of part of this like women's photo group, and there was one woman in the group who was she had really studied with Larry Fink, and I really didn't know who Larry Fink was, but it was all like Larry all the time. She was just talking about him, and she was making the most beautiful pictures at the time of strippers, actually. And I loved what she was doing, and he was such an inspiration to her that I finally, it was by 1990 or so, I signed up for a class, a weekend workshop with Larry Fink at one of the smaller colleges in the Boston area. It's like, who is this Larry Fink? I need to meet him. So I finally met him, and you know what? It was a life-changing weekend for me. Mm-hmm. At the time I was working as a newspaper photographer, and I liked it. I didn't love what I was doing. I was like tired of, eating every meal behind my steering wheel and standing in the rain shooting high school soccer and up really late at night shooting the local elections. Like I liked it, but it wasn't really making my heart sing at all. And one thing he said to me during that weekend, and really to everybody in our class, he said, attraction is proportionate to destiny. And this really, really grabbed me. And I thought, well, should I only be photographing subjects that I'm attracted to on some level? It completely, from that moment on, changed the way I was working and how I wanted to work. And in fact, I left newspaper photography some months after, and I moved down to New York City, really to, so I could have a job and still pursue personal projects. But I wound up working at the Black Star photo agency, but I no longer wanted to photograph for a newspaper anymore. It completely changed the course of what I was doing. And subsequently, I guess, after that, every project I've really worked on has been something that I was really very, very interested in and drawn to. And that's always sort of been my guide in a way. And I had the chance to actually tell him that. I did a workshop with him a few years ago through Aperture, and he really got pretty choked up actually when I told him, but it completely changed the course of my photography and my work life, in fact, because I realized I no longer wanted to be working really as a photographer. So it was like, who knew that one weekend was going to do that for me? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. You never really predict these things.
Right. That's what I mean. You don't know where it's going to come from.
Yeah. Do you find, in terms of, we all have work that we love, but that may not necessarily lead to any kind of particular inspiration for our own work. Do you find that the work that inspires you tends to be work that's similar to yours, or completely different, or kind of whatever? Do you notice any trends there?
I think there are some similarities in some ways. Look, you could look at, say, Lens Scratch. Like yesterday, there was an amazing set of pictures on Lens Scratch that I really just kind of blew my mind of victims of gun violence. And I looked at every photograph and I read every caption, and actually my younger son read them as well, and we were really moved. And, I was very inspired. And in fact, I think later today I'm going to be making a donation to prevent gun violence through the Sandy Hook organization, because I really feel like we need to do something. Anyway, so I did find them very inspiring on that level. But I think the work that really inspires my own work tends to kind of, I'm certainly no Dan Arbus and I'm no Larry Fink, but there are certain things, like, for example, like the work of Mark Cohen, who I love, 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 love. Do you know Mark Cohen?
No.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know.
Love. When I sort of stumbled upon his work, which may have been probably around 2009 or 10 or so, maybe on American Suburban X or, ASX. I'm not even sure where I found him. Sort of almost like this is kind of pre-Facebook era, but he is a photographer who has spent most of his life in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, shooting very gritty, black and white, really street photography, but in his own way. And I feel very much a kinship with his work, which is maybe why I like it so much. But it continues to inspire me. In fact, he really kind of makes not something out of nothing, but they're kind of in between moments. They're not decisive moments. They're indecisive moments. And compositionally, I feel very much the same. It's very interesting, actually. But I continue to love his work. And looking at that really pushes me to work harder, frankly. Yeah. So, to really go beyond my comfort zone, because these pictures are very uncomfortable, his pictures, frankly. So I don't know, I think in some ways I could certainly appreciate a lot of work. And, somebody like Nancy Borowick, I love her story. Her cancer family project is amazing and moves me to tears every single time I see it. Every post she posts, she's got this amazing Kickstarter going now. And every time I engage with that work, I just lose it every time.
Yeah.
So it's totally inspiring to me. And I love the way she, her parents allowed her to photograph them in this very, horrible time in their lives, really. And it's just, the whole thing's amazing to me and feels very close to home in some ways. And I really admire her for being able to make the work. And I so admire her parents for allowing her in.
Yeah.
What an amazing thing they actually did for her understanding of what was happening. It was very generous, I think, of them. Amazing people.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of really inspiring work out there.
Yeah.
And, but it's not necessarily my work,
Yeah.
What about for you? Do you find you like photographers' work that's nothing like yours?
Well, in terms of work that I love, there is work out there that I think is really fantastic. That is like there's a woman. I took a workshop in Tucson in January of last year, and I met this really great group of artists. And there's just one woman, her name's Melanie Walker, and her work. There's some conceptually, it's not like in a completely different universe, but like if you just look at it, it is nothing like what I do, like not even close. And it's. I mean, she uses the word "it's weird," which is true. But it's really nothing like I love her work intensely, but I don't find that it's inspiring to me in terms of like making me think, well, now I'm going to do something of my own. Right. And that's one of the things, like what I've been finding, I was thinking about this last night, that a lot of the work that inspires me, whether it's photographic or not, tends to be work where it has something in common with either my work or me or something like that, where I feel like either the work or the creator has there's something familiar about it, like Melanie's work is very psychological, and it's very, it's very, like it's, I'm trying to think of the right, surreal.
Is it conceptual?
It's very conceptual. Yeah. Like she's got all these pictures where she makes these puppets that are like, that have houses for heads, and then she photographs them, and like she does stuff like where she'll take the photographs and then put them on a kite and fly the kite and then take a picture of that. And so it's like several layers deep.
Wow.
And it's really interesting. And when you hear her talk about it, like it's a little bit opaque because you don't really understand like why she's doing these things. They just kind of seem strange and surreal. But when you hear her talk about this, how there are these representations of these childhood dreams that she had, or like the, representations of the way she felt about her family growing up. And it's very moving, and I love it. But it's not something that I feel like is applicable to what I do. And like lately, the people that have been, like the things that have been inspiring me the most lately are actually not even photographic. Like there's a book I've been gushing about on the podcast. I think this will be the third time I've mentioned it on the show, by this author named Celeste Ng, and it's called Everything I Never Told You. And it's sort of a family drama set in the 70s, and like in the very first line of the book, one of the daughters of the family has died, and they're sort of trying to find out what happened. And the thing is like it's a mixed race Asian and white family growing up in like Ohio. And I was reading this thing, and it just crushed me, and then it's been making me think a lot about how I kind of want to, because I related to some of it so much that I feel like this is something I want to talk about too. There's a similar thing that's been happening to me with Hamilton lately, and
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either, but I've been listening to the cast album like just obsessively for like the past month or so.
Yeah.
And also I've been following Lin-Manuel Miranda on Twitter and reading all the interviews that he does and watching him appear on other stuff. And it's just like his story and then the story that he made are just, there's something about them that's not even necessarily, there's some point of connection where it's like the character of Alexander Hamilton, he's got these traits that I can relate to. And the sort of drive that Miranda seems to have to make things is something that, like, this urgency that I can relate to that. And those are the things that I feel like where it really applies to what I'm doing, and where I feel like where it in turn imparts an urgency in me to do something.
Well, then that's inspiration, that's exciting.
Yeah.
It really is. You could tune into that and have some takeaway.
Yeah.
That informs your practice. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hard to find. I think sometimes if you go seeking inspiration, you certainly don't find it, It has to kind of find you, I think.
Yeah.
in a funny way. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There've been many photographers over the years whose work I've really admired, and I love the work of Joanne Callis, particularly her color work from the 70s. Just like when I saw that in Aperture about a year and a half ago, I was just blown away. So beautiful, sexual, stunning, gorgeous, these evocative images, and they were so ahead of their time. They look like they could be made like now, but they were made in late 70s, and beautiful bodies and color and gorgeous. Really moved me. So you could feel a kinship with some work, and certainly I don't need to emulate anybody. It's already been done. I just need to emulate myself and tune into what I need to do. But it is really nice though when you can feel something from a photograph, a painting, a play, music. I mean, that's sort of the idea. And I think we tend to be a little more sensitive to that and more open to it maybe because, we're in the arts, and I don't know if everybody feels that way, but I certainly do.
Yeah.
I need all those things in my life. It really informs and enriches my life tremendously.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like my whole life, not just artistically, but just in general, is just this process of looking for connections with people, which isn't something that comes naturally to me very much. And so that is one of the ways that art becomes really necessary for me, because it's sort of a way of finding a connection with people in a way that isn't as, I don't know, scary as sometimes just talking to people can be. But
people can be scary.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. Do you ever find yourself wanting to photograph a stranger?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what do you do? Do you ask? Do you do it? Do you walk away and say, I should have done it?
Mostly the latter. Occasionally, I try not to take pictures of people surreptitiously, because I just feel like people are really weird about that these days.
Yeah, my pictures are never good when I do that.
Yeah.
They're never even worth having.
But I also find that when I actually do go up and talk to people and say, hey, can I take I just noticed you, I'd like to take your picture. Most of the time they say yes, but then now that they're aware of that I'm looking at them, it changes their demeanor,
Yeah, it can. Well, that's the thing. I really love street photography. I love it. I could really, I love it so. And I can't really do it because I am afraid of strangers. One thing, I do kind of as business, I do a couple things. I bookmaking business, but I also, I shoot parties. So bar bat mitzvahs and, that kind of thing. So what I love about doing that work, and aside from that, it is nice to actually make some money. And I'm sure my husband and family appreciate that. I really love the access to people. They know why you're there. You don't really have to ask permission. It's kind of fun. It's like eye candy, frankly.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy doing those jobs. And occasionally I'll walk away with a more personal picture. From a job like that. That's not always the outcome, but it's certainly one of my goals when I go in. But I love that access. For me, the party is it's like street photography, but in a safe space where everybody knows that I'm there to make pictures.
Yeah.
So I sort of get my yayas out there, but I can't really do it on the street.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah, I have exactly the same thing because I actually adore shooting weddings. And it's one of those things too. It's among art photographers, that and family portraits are kind of very condescended to. But the people that are good at it are really good at it. And I actually just really like being at weddings. I think weddings are fun. But there is a thing where it's exactly what you were just saying, where it's the same instincts that would apply if you were out on the street. You see a thing, you want to take that, you take the shot, and but when I try and do it on the street, I'm so nervous about the fact that I don't think that I'm supposed to be doing it, and it really makes the pictures look very either furtive or sort of or you can tell that they're hurried, that they're not honest.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, but when I'm at a wedding and I've been paid to be there, and I'm supposed to be doing that, I really loosen up, and I can get a lot of really good shots.
I'm sure you can. Yeah, it's a totally different experience. So I do really I kind of feel like, even though I am getting paid, I do feel like I'm invited to be there, so it gives you license to, photograph people's hands and their jewelry and their shoes or short, sequin skirts or whatever. That's the stuff I really love, actually. And I don't do it that often, really, not as much as I would like to, but I don't advertise. I'm sort of all word of mouth, but when I do get in those parties, I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And this is another thing is, one of the, and I don't know if this is like the sixth or seventh time I've said this in this conversation, but like,
I'll let you know.
That your work is something that really inspires me. And when you're, one of the things about Pretty Please that I find really like a pull towards is because so much of it is self-portraiture. There's another woman who I met last year. Her name is Samantha Jabal. I talked to her.
Yeah, I listened to your interview with her.
I mean, she's fantastic, and all of her pictures are self-portraits.
Oh, she's amazing. I met her at Photo Lucida. Last spring. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, and so like I see work like yours, like hers, that are doing these really interesting things with self-portraiture, and I think like I really want to do something like that. But like, I just cannot get past this idea of having people look at me. And also in particular, because I think I still am kind of clinging to this idea that people are going to want to hire me for weddings. And like, I don't know how, like if I had a bunch of pictures of myself, particularly if like they were of my body, like how that would affect how people would see me, potential clients would see me. Is that something that you ever think about? Or I don't know.
I do. I think about it. Well, okay, two different things, actually. I do think about it, but more in terms of my kids, where there are some more explicit pictures from Pretty Please, but they're not online. So there's that. But the other piece of this is that I really separate my client website from my personal website. And not to say that a client couldn't find my personal work, and that's fine if they do. And either they get me or they don't. And it's really okay. Like, I'm not, if I don't get the job because they don't like the picture of my belly button, it's fine. Then I don't need to be working for those people. Really, I mean that. And I really do want to work for people who appreciate what it is I bring to the job and my eye and who want me there. So it's okay, and I may not always get the job, and that's fine. But I do separate the work. So there's a separate website for my party work and my bookmaking from my personal. But I'm more concerned, I guess, the work that I sometimes feel like I need to make. And I do make it from time to time, but it's kind of hidden a little bit. I've got these two teenage boys, and they've got access full time to, through their smartphones.
Right.
So I try to be a little bit careful in some ways. In fact, the other day, I asked my son Zach, I had like a face mask on. It was like yellow green. I didn't know it was going to be that color, and I just put it on. And I said, "Hey, can you take a picture of me?" And I told him where to focus, and it was sort of like my mouth. And he's like, "What are you going to do with this picture?" I said, "Well, sometimes I photograph myself, and I need your help." He's like, "Okay, as long as I get some credit." I'm like, "Okay, you'll get credit." So it was kind of cute, but I don't really think they have a sense of these pictures, despite the fact that they're online. And but I will say, in terms of your own practice, like I never set out to do this project, Pretty Please. This evolved really through my other family work. It all just sort of came about at the same time, where I would occasionally turn the camera on myself. There was no big concept or idea here. This really came together kind of in some ways after the fact, where I realized I had all these pictures, and could they in fact be their own project? And when I put them online, in that way, I guess it was first 2013 I did that, where I recognized that it was really its own project. But until then, it had kind of also been part of what I called Wanderlust, which were these pictures from that were going on my blog, and became sort of a more pointed group of family pictures. And then I pulled these pictures out. But I didn't go in with a big concept in mind, and that's most of my work. I mean, I'm not a conceptual photographer. I'm a very reactive photographer. But, I just make the images and sort of worry about it later. But turning the camera myself was really just very sporadic over the years. And I suddenly realized I kind of had enough of them. When I really looked closely, I could sort of see what was going on here. But I've talked about this before at other venues and with friends and other photographers and editors, that in some ways, if I were to weave the pictures from Pretty Please into the larger body of family work, it would make perfect sense to me. Mm-hmm. I don't know as like a larger project how it would look as a book or an exhibition, or like I kind of laugh, for like, my mid-career retrospective at the Whitney, that's how we'll hang it. But seriously, I sort of feel like that the stuff Pretty Please really is just sort of like extracted from everything else. That's really how I feel about it. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wonder if I were to sequence it all, how I would feel, even just to like, maybe I should do a blurb book and just see how it comes together.
Yeah.
But I guess for the sake of having a website, you need projects and galleries, and you have to separate things. So, I can't have one run on gallery with 200 pictures.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, you say you're not a conceptual photographer, where like I would have said that you are, because...
Oh, I'm not.
Well, I mean, but I guess it's just a difference in terminology, because like one of the things that I find that I'm drawn to, like that work that I'm drawn to has to be delivering some kind of, not message exactly, but like a concept where like with like Pretty Please as you have it on your website right now, like the pictures all like they visually hang together, but they also thematically hang together, and you're making a statement, you're expressing something, where like I find that a lot of like one thing that's really popular right now is this like new formalism photography.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And like I know some of these people are like saying that it's conceptual, like that it has like they're trying to make a statement about whatever, but to me a lot of it just feels like it's cool, but like I don't really get anything out of it.
Right, because you don't get anything out of it.
Right.
Sometimes that's sort of like either some pictures are going to work for you or they're not going to work for you, and it's okay. Not everybody wants to look at pictures of whatever, water towers or whatever,
triangles,
electrical plants or whatever that, you know what I'm saying? So, and yet they have their place in the history of photography, but if it doesn't move you, it doesn't move you. But I really so believe in the power of an edit. Mm-hmm. Much of my background is as a photo editor, and I spent about a dozen years working in New York City as a photo editor. And I'm a little bit ruthless, maybe not as hard on my own work as I should be at times, but it's all in the edit and the sequencing. Mm-hmm. Like if I were to sequence myself Pretty Please back into, say, Wanderlust, it would be a pretty pointed edit. I think so much of what comes about is in the edit. Like, for example, Drift. The way that project came about, I'm just going to be totally transparent here. I was getting ready to go to Photolucida last spring, and my main body of work was going to be Pretty Please. And I printed it up 16 by 20, this nice big red box for it. It was pretty, whatever. And I wanted to show a secondary body of work, but I didn't want to bring another giant portfolio with me. I wanted to bring something smaller, but I didn't know what to do. And I kind of wanted to bring some new work. So I had gone through all of my work for like the last 2 years and printed out about 200 4x6, just quick prints. Did it all online. They were mailed to me, and I laid them out on a couple of card tables in my workspace in my office, and I sat with them for a couple of weeks, and I played with them, and I moved them into different groups, and some of them were really just strictly abstract and about color, and some were about family, and I played around with them, and then I basically called this group together and put it together in a magazine, and Drift was born. It was really as like a giveaway at Photolucida. I wanted to be able to give magazines to people in case they, I wanted to have something in my back pocket, say, hey, take this home if you like it. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of a backwards way into a project. I'd been shooting all along. It was just more family work. But I realized that something different was happening in those pictures. And had I not printed them all out and lived with them for a while and physically shuffled them around, I may never have found it. So, to be able to sort of take stock in what you've done over a period of time is really important, to really look at your work and live with it, and not just on the computer.
Yeah.
It was a really big part of the process for me. Yeah. So, I went off to Photolucida with about 10 of those magazines, and I gave them all away, which was really nice. I mailed a bunch of copies after the people, people wanted them, and it was really nice. And it's kind of cool. But, I suddenly realized that my work had taken a turn away from Wanderlust. It looked different. It felt different. It was still family, but there was something else happening.
Yeah.
So, that's sort of my process. I sort of come about things a little backwards.
Yeah. I guess what I just mean, like, because that's mostly what I do as well, is that it's like the shoot first, ask questions later approach.
Yes.
And that's, most of my work, especially when I was starting, and the work that I think is really the best and most developed came about that way.
Right.
And I find it's difficult for me sometimes to shoot to a concept, like to shoot within, intentionally making work for a project. A lot of it feels very contrived. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of right now trying to, like, I just a couple of days ago had this idea, I had this idea and I was going to think, okay, well, I'll write this as an essay. And then I thought, it's a little much for an essay. It's like, it's going to come off as self-indulgent if it's just an essay. And I thought, well, I could make this, I like to do text and pictures. I'll add pictures. And then I thought, what in the hell are the pictures going to be? And so that's sort of where I am with this thing right now. I'm just like wondering what the pictures are going to be. And so I'm trying to find a way in to shoot it intentionally, but I like that really.
It's hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, some people have a big concept, and I love that. Like you mentioned, Phil Toledano, like he had some concepts, really strong, beautiful work, amazing, very compelling projects. And
although his Reluctant Father series, it looked like it was put together afterwards.
It probably was. Yeah, for sure. And that feels totally different to me from his other work.
That's true.
But I guess all of his work feels sort of different project-wise. He kind of takes turns and I do love that, actually, where just because you've been doing something one way doesn't mean you couldn't, say, take off and do something conceptually or, street photography. If you decided to take that up tomorrow or today, who's to say you couldn't do that? You can, and I love photographers that can sort of switch gears.
Yeah.
I can't seem to do that so well, but I certainly appreciate when people can.
So I guess what I meant when I say I think of you as being a conceptual artist is that maybe the way that you shoot isn't with a concept in mind, but that the end product, like the end product has a concept in it, and that comes out through the edit and sequence.
I think it does. I just think it's so important to sort of acknowledge that, because these pictures could almost have been anything in a way. You decide sort of what they are, you package them and you present them and you say, okay, this is what it is. This is what's been going on. But it just sort of, I guess because I really am, as I said, sort of pretty reactive as a photographer, and I do sort of make the pictures and then I think about them later. And in some ways, like, my blog, which I've been doing, kind of on and off, I guess more off than on lately, since 2010, it's been a really good process for me. Mm-hmm. It's kind of been like a springboard for ideas. It forces me to kind of really look at images and think about them and what they really mean to me, so when it strikes me and I can actually put up a post, and I'm writing less now than I used to, but I used to write a lot about those pictures. And it was really, really helpful for me to do that, as a springboard for ideas and really, and to be able to share it. It really helped me sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess sort of synthesize all of these thoughts and make them cohesive. Does that make sense? I mean, I really love my blog, and I don't give it as much respect as I should, but it's been great for me. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I know blogs seem so 2010 at this point, but I still love my blog. Yeah, I do too. Mine's been neglected lately as well, and you used to post a lot. I know, but lately I've been kind of more focused on either doing stuff photographically or trying to write more long form stuff, but then I actually have to sit down and take the time to do that. So it's tough. Well, what's so nice about your blog posts when you do them, they are really these beautiful little vignettes of your life. And I think what's so, likewise. It's just part of, but that's part of the process. Like, I like knowing your process. I like knowing anybody's process because I think it's so important to talk about. Mm-hmm. The work doesn't come from nowhere. Right. It doesn't just arrive as a project. I mean, maybe some ways it does for some people, but I'm I'm a working, photographer, artist, whatever, documentary, person.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to talk about process. I mean, I know, I just looked at this Larry Sultan book, and his process throughout this book is so interesting. It's a beautiful book. I know we talked about it a little bit and we weren't going to get too deep into it, but Pictures from Home, I mean, throughout the book, and I'd never really read the text, but finally just did, his process is transparent. Mm-hmm. He doesn't quite know what he's looking for. His parents don't exactly know what he's looking for. They sort of call him on the fact that he doesn't know what he's looking for, and yet he figures it out. And it's part of what I loved about reading this book, Pictures from Home, is the text and how he talks to his parents and they tell their stories and sort of where they all arrive at the end of the book. They've kind of got to figure it out. But I don't think he went into that series thinking, I'm making a book about my parents later in life. Mm-hmm. He just went in and did what he needed to do, but without really knowing what he needed to do. It's sort of, the project kind of told him mm-hmm. where it was going in a way, and I love that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to sort of tune into, your own process.
Yeah.
And let that guide you.
Well, I think that is probably a perfect insight to end on.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was really fun.
Yeah, I'm glad you had a good time. I always like talking to you.
Yeah, and I know we've had some long-winded messages through Facebook and other rants, but it is nice to always talk to you, and hopefully one day we'll get to do that in person.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so that was my conversation with Andi Schreiber. I want to thank Andi once again, not just for being on the show, but for all her help and support over the years. You can find more of her work on her website, which I've linked in the show notes, and you can also follow her on Twitter at Andi Schreiber. And now, before we go, I want to do something a little different, a special little thing for this episode. I mentioned again Celeste Ng's book, Everything I Never Told You. Well, I decided that I want more people to read it and tell me about it. Plus, I always like to support artists in their work, so I went out and I bought 5 copies. And so the first 5 people to send me an email and ask for one, it's yours. So just send me an email at podcast@keepthechannelopen.com with your name and mailing address, and I will pop it in the mail for you. And of course, if you have any comments or questions, you can send those along as well. You can also find me and the show on Twitter at ChannelOpenPod or on Facebook at Keep the Channel Open. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is by Poddington Bear. You can find more of his music available for licensing at soundofpicture.com. Next week's guest will be photographer Carolina Montejo, so be sure to come back for that one. Until then, remember, keep the channel open.